Yeah.
Do you think that the Eagles are doing enough to get the best out of Jalen Hurts?
Right now, no. But as Howie recently said, it's not over yet. You know, off-season movements is not over yet.
Welcome back to the National Football Show. Your boy Dan Sileo here. And Xander, I want you to do me a favor. That soundbite that I asked for earlier in the middle with Sirianni talking about the general manager of the team. Before I bring in D. Gunn, I want him to hear this actually, because it's one of the very first times that I've ever heard an NFL head football coach say that the general manager is the boss and that he runs the day-to-day operations of what goes on in an NFL locker room, the roster, pretty much the coaches. And you can even hear that when he needed to sell the GM on Zach Pascal, he had to. Let's play this here. This is him at the owners' meetings, Nick Sirianni talking about his relationship with the general manager.
Again, Howie and I talk about everything, and every decision we make is, you know, we talk through it. Obviously, Howie is in charge of the team and putting the team together. You know, but he's using all the resources that he has to help do that, and so we talk about everything. And of course, I thought, you know, I want Zach Pascal on this football team. I don't think that's a secret here.
Okay, so he had to sell it to the general manager that he wanted him, instead of the general manager, vice versa, selling a player to the coach because it's his roster. You understand that the general manager has complete autonomy on Sunday, Thursday, when it comes to like the injury report and who's going to be active. I know that everyone has known this, and this is kind of an epiphany for Sileo, but I'd never heard it at an NFL owners meetings. Let's bring in D. Gunn here for this, and I'll tell you something right there, Derek. I mean, flat out, there's something there that I had not really ever thought I'd ever hear outside of the Dallas Cowboys situation, where the general manager of your football team has complete autonomy over the entire roster. And to me, I think that this becomes sometimes the tug of war on what the direction of the team is.
You know, that story came out a couple of seasons ago that Howie Roseman, this was when Doug Peterson was still the coach, that Howie Roseman was the one who set the 53-man roster on game days, so on and so forth. We see it across the league sporadically. It doesn't happen everywhere. Usually it's the head coach and his staff that set the roster for game day. But in this case, that was a story that came out, and there's no reason to believe that's not the case. Howie has his signature on just about everything that moves in that organization. You know, Jeffrey Lurie gives him that autonomy, for better or worse, whether you agree with it or not. And plus, he just gave him a 3-year extension. So that tells you all you need to know about how much Jeffrey Lurie thinks about Howie Roseman. And I do believe that was part of the rift between Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman, the fact that Doug wanted more say-so in day-to-day operations, and I think Howie was unwilling to relinquish it. Now, again, that's my opinion. You know, don't quote me verbatim on that, but obviously there was a lot of tension in the latter stages of Doug Peterson's tenure here between him and Howie, which, of course, led to him leaving the Philadelphia Eagles. But, yeah, I'm not surprised one bit that Nick Sirianni said basically Howie Roseman has the final say with what goes on here.
You know what's funny is that, Derek, I had Kevin Colbert on the show last year, and Kevin Colbert has always made it so that during the regular season, he never does an interview because he doesn't want to undermine anything that Mike Tomlin wants on his team or has to say about his football team's performance, because he doesn't want to get in the way of the coach. And that's why the Steelers have won the most Super Bowls of anybody, I think, in the NFL, is because they've had that dynamic. They've only had 3 coaches since 1969. There's been continuity in there, and there's been, you know, your lane. You're here. You get players. Not saying that Kevin doesn't have the power in there to tell Mike whatever he wants behind the scene. But to me, again, this kind of undermines. If I'm a player in that locker room, Derek, so if I have a problem, I know the head coach has no power in that locker room. I look at Nick Sirianni and go, I'm not going to him for any issues. If I got any kind of problems, I'm going to Sirianni, because Sirianni's the guy put me on the team. I mean, Roseman's the guy that put me on the team, not Nick.
I think when you look at coaches that have their so-called players committee, I think in some cases the head coach, and in this case could very well be the case with Nick Sirianni, he's that buffer between the players and the front office. The players vent to the coach meets with the GM weekly, daily, whatever the case may be, depending on what organization you're in, and then the coach, relays some of the frustrations or concerns that players might have with what's going on, and then it's up to the decision maker, i.e. the general manager, to step in and do something about it, or a collaboration of the owner, general manager, head coach to step in and to do something about it. So I get where you're coming from, but it worked for Doug Peterson in terms of having that players committee. Andy Reid, when he was here, had his players committee. Andy Reid came in here as a young coach. He gained power in terms of decision-making. Then in the latter stages of his career, that was taken away from him. But Andy Reid always had his players committee. Players could bounce stuff off him. He could bounce stuff off them. And then then Andy, Doug would have that conversation with the front office people.
Do you think players go to Kevin Colbert in Pittsburgh, or do you think they go to Mike Tomlin when they got a problem?
I think they go to Mike Tomlin. I think they go to Mike Tomlin.
Derek, I'm looking at it like this. Maybe this is just the new NFL, because you see all these new young guys having to work with front offices.
Right.
So maybe it's a me thing here that I have to look at it. And that's why you see the Kevin Stefanskis, the Matt LaFleur's, and all this, that, hey, you're going to have to work with these front offices more so than those old school power coaches like Buddy Ryan or Jimmy Johnson. Right. Is that a different lens for me to look through?
Yeah, I think it has to be, because when you look at people like you and the Barrett Brooks of the world, you guys played back in the 90s, okay? And when I talk to former players now, and I mean players that I think would make good coaches in the NFL, a lot of them laugh and say, I don't want to coach in today's NFL. And I said, why? And the common denominator has been, man, you can't coach these young players nowadays. They're too sensitive. Whereas you could coach 53 guys one way back in your day, and prior to that, you need 53 different kind of psychologists now to coach these players nowadays. You got some who are overly sensitive. I've been told players sometimes they'll shut down and borderline pout, if they get yelled at or if they don't get their way. These coaches nowadays have to have kid gloves with a lot of players. A Bill Belichick still has that ranking where, it's like that old commercial, when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. When Bill Belichick talks, everybody stops. But there are not a lot of Bill Belichicks in the National Football League. When Mike Tomlin talks, people stop. But there's very few of those. And, these teams now want to get the younger coaches, these young, brilliant offensive mind coaches coming in. I mean, some of these coaches now almost the same age as the players. The Eagles had a special teams coach who was 29 years old. He was young as some of the players. So, it's a different mindset now in terms of how you approach these guys, man. Some guys are old school. You yell at them, they buckle up, they play harder for you. Some guys, you yell at them, they shut down, man. And you got to pat them on the back. You got to coddle them to get them back in the game. And, it's a completely different ball game than when you played this game, brother.
You're right. And it's a different mentality in how to build a team. I heard a comment also that was made by the owner of the team, that he said he wanted a prolific offense, and he wanted it to be an air raid type, offensive attack. Right. And I'm going to ask you something here. When I look at the history of the Philadelphia Eagles, and I just went from 2000, but then I started thinking, let me go in the history of the Eagles with explosive players. I want to read you a list here that kind of blew my mind. Would we agree, Derek, that today the NFL is set up for the passing game more so than any other time in its history?
There's no question about it.
Well, let me read you this.
Okay.
All-time, and let me get through at least 10 of these. Okay, so the all-time leading wide receiver in Eagle history is Harold Carmichael. He started his career in 1971.
Mm-hmm.
Pete Retzlaff started his career in 1956, and he's a tight end. He's second. Here we get to a modern-day player, D-Jax, 6,500 yards, 08 to 2020. That's the lengthiest guy that I could see with an explosive player. Then you get part of the color analyst team, Mike Quick at fourth, started his career in 1982. Then you go all the way down. Bobby Watson, 1951. There's a guy, Tommy McDonald, started his career in 1957. He's 7th. You got guys from the 40s, the 50s, the 70s, and the 80s in the top 10. The Philadelphia Eagles have never had an explosive offense in the history of the league. Where is he coming from when you see Zach Pascal and you see a guy making $890,000? I'm just trying to figure out the history of the franchise. They've never had a lengthy, explosive player. You've had T.O. Macklin was good, but why haven't they been able to really have an explosive guy in this franchise going back to the 70s and 50s?
It is perplexing. And you can't say Howie Roseman hasn't spent the capital since he's been at the helm in terms of drafting wide receivers. He's just drafted the wrong guys. You know, the guys that have not panned out, except for Devontae Smith, who I think is going to have a Pro Bowl or two in his career before it's all said and done. Deshaun Jackson had the capability, but because he was slight of frame, Deshaun Jackson couldn't stay healthy a lot of times. And I hate to use this term, but Deshaun Jackson basically was a one-trick type of receiver. He could take a top off the defense.
He wasn't a route runner.
No, he's not going to be the guy you're going to throw to over the middle. You get that poor guy killed. Yeah. You know, you're running them over the middle. So, you know, so they've had bits and pieces of certain types of receivers, but they haven't had that so-called complete receiver. And it's mind-boggling when you consider, as you just mentioned a moment ago, look at the brand of today's football. It's air raids left and right, you know, and you look at the volume of receivers that are making these plays, these big, fast targets. Big, you know, guys, you know, the league is now, you know, just swamped with the Calvin Jones. Calvin Johnson's, Julio Jones, Devontae Adams, all these big guys now, DK Metcalf, you know. You still sprinkle in, you know, Tariq, you know, Hill every now and then. But for the most part, these guys are getting bigger and faster. And you're spreading the field more than ever now. You know, you even got tight ends now that are running 4.4s and 4.5s in the National Football League. And for the life of me, I just don't understand why this team hasn't gravitated towards that more. You know, I know Philadelphia Eagles fans want to see it more. I know Jeffrey Lurie wants more of a passing game. But when you go back to 2021, you can't argue with the success that they had in terms of turning that season around once they went to a dominant running game. You know, there's still a few teams in the NFL that love to run the football. You look at a team like the Tennessee Titans. You know, they ran their way into the playoffs. You know, the pass set up their run, you know, for the most part. And the Eagles, and I know people are going to say, well, you look at the schedule they played. You look at the inferior quarterbacks they played. You know, if this team had won 6 or 7 games, people would have been jumping for joy considering the previous year they'd won 4 games. Okay, but they rallied and won 9 games and got some young players a lot of valuable experience in a playoff situation, even though they got tattooed by Tampa Bay. You know, it was David versus Goliath, and David stomped them, you know. But these young guys got a lot of valuable experience. So now you're sitting here with 3 first-round draft picks. I still believe that they should focus more on defense and offense. But if that one receiver is sitting on the board that's supposed to be head and shoulders above everybody else, you got to take that guy because they need another receiver. They need a bigger target. If it's a slot target, Jalen Hurts needs a bigger target, a DK Metcalf type body. You know, one of these big guys he can get the ball to. And, you know, and as you know, Dan, a lot of times when you get the bigger receivers, the athletic, acrobatic receivers, they make a bad pass look extremely good, and it usually ends up making a national highlight reel somewhere. And we know Jalen Hurts has had problems with his accuracy. Now, he's working with somebody in the offseason out in Southern California. Hopefully it helps him increase certain areas of his game twofolds. But if he continues on the sporadic passing route that he did in 2021, you know, get you one of these big wide bodies, aircraft carriers that can make some of those bad passes look good and save your butt in a lot of situations. So I think the Eagles do need to get one. I'm not down and out yet on Quez Watkins. You know, he's a bigger target and he's lightning fast, and I think he has potential, but you got to get him more reps. You know, whether you move him to the slot and get you another outside guy or leave Quez on the outside and get you an inside guy. Get you another body where Jalen Hurts can spread the field like a lot of these top flight passing teams are doing in the National Football League.
You know, I think maybe you just answered the question I'm going to ask here, because when I look, and I'm going to throw this at you here, you know, you look at the base salaries. I mean, Devontae Smith, $825, Quez, $895. The guy they brought in for the third wideout, Zach Pascal, $1 million. This is not with signing bonuses. Goddard, $1 million. Sanders, 1.2. Then you got a quarterback that's on a $1.5 million deal.
Right.
And these guys aren't spending over $5 million. And yet I keep hearing people say, well, you got to get more for Jalen if you're going to improve and find out who you have. Look what they're doing in Miami now for Tua Tagovailoa. They went out, they got Hill, they got Waddle at 104 picks last year. And I say this to you. Even Wentz, they went out and got Alshon Jeffries.
Yeah.
Do you think that the Eagles are doing enough to get the best out of Jalen Hurts?
Right now, no. But as Howie recently said, it's not over yet. You know, offseason movements is not over yet. Now, I'd be shocked if they could still get, an Odell. You know, I don't think Odell's coming here. I don't think Jarvis Landry's coming here. But there's still a few, veteran receivers on the board that can make this offense that much better. You know, the Eagles pursued certain wide receivers, big name wide receivers, but I think they were blown away like all of us with the way the money ballooned for wide receivers this offseason. Christian Kirk, got $70-something million. Devontae Adams, $142 million. Bottom line is get what you can while you can, because, the NFL is not forever. But the numbers that have been thrown out there, you look at Tyreek Hill, what he got, going down to Miami. The numbers have been crazy for wide receivers, and Howie Roseman doesn't want to play that game. Howie Roseman wants to try to build this the right way. Never in the history of this organization have they had 3 first-round draft picks. They've been committed to being on this youth movement to get better. And as we know, Dan, a lot of times now you don't have to wait 4 or 5 years to get better. You can get better in a hurry. So if you draft the right guys and you sprinkle in some low-budget veteran players to make your roster more respectable, you can turn this thing around a lot quicker.
2 last questions for you, G. Let me throw this at you here too. Maybe again, this is something else, and maybe we're all stuck in the cement here, or at least me here. You look at what the Rams are doing. The Rams don't give a shit about draft choices. They just push their chips in, and like you said, the Buccaneers and Jason Light, they just said, "Let's go get it here."
Yeah.
The Dolphins are now doing it, and here, watch this. As bad as that firing was for Brian Flores, why do I feel better about Miami today than I did 2 months ago when I look at what they did by getting that free agent tackle? They got Tyreek Hill on the other side. I look at the Dolphins now and go like this. Gee, they went from a defensive-minded football team to an offensive-minded team. I don't even know who the new coach is. I never heard of him. And I'm sitting there going like this with Miami. I feel better about that because they're kind of pushing it all in here. Is that just something that Howie, again, they're $35 million worth of dead money still on the Eagle cap. So I don't know if that plays a factor in this and why free agency was with the Kaiser Smiths and all this other, and why they were good players, but they weren't the reach players that you need. Am I wrong when I'm saying that? The Eagles just don't want to go all in on free agency.
No, and in the past, Howie has been criticized for overpaying free agents in a lot of ways. And now the philosophy has shifted a little bit differently now to doing it, hopefully, by their estimations, the right way, now. The New England Patriots for 2 decades, they wrote the blueprint on how to give up multitudes of draft picks and take somebody else's veteran player and put them in Bill Belichick's offense or defense, and they're in the Super Bowl every other year. And look at how many Super Bowls they won. They didn't always go out and get the big names, but they got the right names to fit their wide receivers, their running backs.
He like a modern-day George Allen?
Absolutely. But see, and all of a sudden the Rams emulated. It started the year before with getting Jalen Ramsey. And then look at what they did to add to the equation this year, bringing in Odell Beckham and Von Miller. And it turned out to be exactly what they needed. Now it's basically, pick your poison. Do you want the quick fix, where you're going to be inundated with a cap strap in a few years and go for it all right now? Or do you want to build it the right way and maybe get some longevity out of it, with a core group of young players who turn out to be great players? They can get you deep into the playoffs. So pick your poison. Rams decided to go the Patriots blueprint. The Eagles are doing like a lot of other teams are doing. They're trying to slowly build this thing together, build a core group of players together. And if you know one thing about Howie, when they identify certain players on their roster, like, Dallas Goedert, Jordan Mailata, players like that, they will pay them and keep that core group here and then continue to add to the equation.
Finally here, how shocked were you that it wasn't so much what Jim Irsay said about Carson Wentz, it was how he said it, like, we couldn't have that in here any longer. We needed to move on from this. It was something that I didn't want. There's no doubt Chris Ballard, and I had Frank Reich on last week, Derrick, and you could tell he didn't want to move off the kid.
Right.
But, boy, I'll tell you, that loss to Jacksonville and how the season ended, he must have wanted him out. He probably said to those two, well, it's either him or you. And then after you guys are gone, I'll dump his ass. Were you shocked how vocal and public he was about his disdain for having Wentz on that roster?
Yeah, you know, usually in the NFL, as you know, you keep stuff like that in the fraternity. You don't let that kind of stuff get out. Now, a lot of stuff, as you know, leaks out because everybody has their so-called, sources, so to speak. When it started to be rumored when Wentz left Philadelphia, people here were thinking, okay, sour grapes, somebody who didn't like Wentz, speaking out against him. But when it happens to two consecutive teams, the stories come out about him not being a good teammate, not being a good leader, and causing more tension than harmony in the locker room. Well, then you give some validity to it. And for management to come out and say that, what does that say about Carson Wentz in terms of how he portrays himself on the surface compared to what is actually happening behind closed doors and on the practice field and come game day? And if Frank Reich, gives up on him, because Frank Reich basically made him what he was in 2017, which was almost the MVP of the season that year. Without Carson Wentz that year, the Eagles do not get to the Super Bowl. For Frank Reich to give up on him, that tells you all you need to know in terms about how frustrating it must have been with a Carson Wentz. Now he's going to Washington, and Rivera is a no-nonsense type coach. So we're going to see how those two personalities mesh, because Rivera is a take-no-nonsense kind of guy. And, how long are you going to put up, that mess? If Carson needs to take a good look at himself in the mirror right now and say, excuse me, what do I want to be?
Yep.
I'm at the crossroads of my career. I've got my money. I've got my money from two teams, the Eagles and the Colts. Now it's about longevity and cleaning up my name before my career is all said and done. And hopefully I can play this game as long as I want to play this game and not get pushed out of the game because my attitude has basically shunned me from teams in the National Football League. So this is on Carson Wentz right now to change his image. This might be his final shot to change his image as a so-called starting quarterback in the National Football League.
So you're starting a new show with D. Brooks on April 18th, man. I can't wait to listen to you guys go around the room here, man. I know you're going to beat him up. He said he's my boy, man. You guys have gone back and forth on Eagles. You got to be looking forward to it, man. I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, Rob Ellis, Barrett Brooks, and I, we've worked together for years. I don't know if you know much about Rob Ellis, but Rob Ellis is one of the best radio voices and ringleaders in this region. And all of us worked together at NBC Sports Philadelphia for years. And we're just elated that three of us now will have a platform where we can basically share inside information. We're going to get great guests on throughout, the week. It's going to be, 12 to 3 every day, Monday through Friday, starting on the 18th of April. And I can't wait to get going with these guys. And my history with Barrett Brooks. It's no holds barred with Brooks and I. There's no punches pulled. I love the guy to death, but I take my shots every chance I get, and he does the same. And I think that's when people see, there's so many shows out there, Dan, where it's all about X's and O's, and it gets boring after a while. People want to see personality. People want to see camaraderie.
Storytelling.
Yeah, and that's what we plan on giving you, as well as information, knowledge, and obviously we'll be fielding questions that we see people put up on the comment section in the show. We'll be talking about some of their questions as well. This is all about three guys who just love hanging out together, who love to talk sports together, and who love to just rip up on each other.
That's kind of my kind of show, and then I'm going to tell you flat out, do me a favor.
Yeah.
There's one thing that I'm getting on Barrett about.
Okay.
This guy played 12 years. He's got a Super Bowl ring. How do I get Bruce Arians on, and how do I get Frank Reich on? And that guy, his ego, you got to break him down, man. This guy knows everybody on the planet. Tell him to open that Rolodex up.
I know, man. And that's another big thing between me, Rob, and Barrett. We have a wealth of people that we can. I just had Sal Palantonio on my Gun on One podcast that's coming out tomorrow. I've had people like Scott Hansen, who I've known for years, Donovan McNabb, Brian Dawkins, Chris Long, my boy DJ Jazzy Jeff. So we're gonna pull out all the stops. Yeah. So we're gonna pull out all the stops and get some of these guys on and talk sports and talk about life in general as well.
I'd like to know what he thought of Will.
Yeah, I haven't heard from him yet. I texted him earlier today. I haven't heard from him yet, but he did put on Twitter that Will, you're the GOAT. I'm proud of you, something along those lines. So he's going to stick up for his boy. I mean, those guys are like Batman and Robin. Oh, yeah. They go back to their teenage years. So he's not going to publicly trash Will in any way, shape, or form.
Nah, I think, sometimes person's actions kind of speak for itself. And then everyone else kind of like fills in the narrative. And you just have to go with what it is. Hey, D Gunn, man, my relationship beginning with you here. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you on, man. You're the most plugged in guy in the Philadelphia. I've talked to numerous people. By the way, I couldn't believe Angelo go like this to me. Dude, this guy Gunn is great. No,
Angelo said that?
Yes, he did.
I got to send him a check now.
Well, believe me, he can afford. Hey, wait a minute. He should send you one because he can afford it.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That guy's been making for 20 years that I know of.
2.7 for 20 years.
Jeez. I make 2.7 also, but that's $2.70. That's
just
a big
take
difference.
0.7 if anyone's out there asking.
There you go.
Hey,
there you go.
Gunn, thank you, man.
You're welcome, brother. Anytime for you, man.
Thank you so much, man. Derrick Gunn, we really appreciate it. Absolutely. Man, I'll tell you something, though, about this Wentz deal here. 5 quarterbacks in 5 years in Indianapolis for Jim Irsay. Okay? You see, the problem with Jim Irsay, though, is his prototypical quarterback that he looks at, that is a guy that he looks at as a franchise guy, he sees Andrew Luck. And everybody that he has had that has gone into Indianapolis and has been a starting quarterback for him has not filled that bill. It's like the Miami Dolphins searching for Dan Marino. You're never going to find Dan Marino again. No matter how you look for it, no matter how you search for it, you're not finding Dan Marino. Same thing in Denver with John Elway. You're not finding it. But what you try to do is you try to find complementary people to it. Winners, guys that know how to move the sticks. And I'm not sticking up for Carson Wentz here. I'm just saying Jim Irsay's track record is not what people think it is. He's got 5 different starting quarterbacks in 5 years. You could say whatever you want about him not liking Wentz. Well, there were 4 other guys that you blew out too that you were not happy with. Okay? I mean, you have not had a guy since Andrew Luck that you felt comfortable with your football team. Now, will Matt Ryan kind of settle it down? The reason to me that I think Matt Ryan was a prime target for the Indianapolis Colts and to replace Carson Wentz? Because he's the closest thing in the NFL that reminds him of Andrew Luck. 39,000 passing yards, former MVP, got a team to the Super Bowl. He's a winning quarterback. Guy's not in the public, opening his pie hole, carries himself, conducts himself with great respect. He fits the part. And that's kind of what Jim Irsay's looking. At least he thought Carson fit the part until he got to know him. And I agree with D Gunn on Wentz. You look at Wentz's numbers and you go, gee, the guy's he's a prototypical NFL quarterback. But when you hear people saying things about, watch this, I don't care if Carson Wentz is an ass. I don't care. But when you hear that Carson Wentz is not one of the best teammates, You've got to have a quarterback that's the best teammate, because he's the motivator of men in that locker room. He's got to have the guy, when things are not going well, that people still believe in, still have the blind faith in. You've got to have that. Hey, Daz, Chris, I'm not saying you're wrong, because you're being proven right. Okay? Maniac, you guys, all of you, you're not wrong. Because his actions, 3 different teams in 3 years, come on, man. All right. I'm going to ask you a question here going into hour number 2. It's being reported that the Detroit Lions want to trade the number 2 pick. And they want to trade down. Should the Eagles move up to the 2nd pick in the draft and get some help for Hurts or for the defense? Should they move into the 2-hole? Instead of moving out, should they move into the 2-hole? We'll hit on that. Hit the like button. Keep it right here on the National Football.